Oh, it's not an X-T4, it's XTC. I really don't like myself right now.
Welcome back, DPReview TV viewers. Chris Nichols here, and we have ourselves a full production X-T4 today. Now, if you take a look at our first impressions hands-on video of the X-T4, we talked a lot about the technical specs, but because it was so pre-production, there's a lot of features we wanted to test, but we just didn't feel were right to do with the camera in that state. So that is what we're going to talk about today. Now, out on the net, the X-T4, a lot of people are saying this is not a very worthy upgrade over the X-T3, and we took a look at our X-T3 video, we thought about some and you know, Jordan and I don't agree with that. We think there's some very interesting potential here. We want to show you that today. Now, the Fuji X-T4 has an incredibly robust autofocusing system. Got all your classic zones, wide area, face and eye detect work fantastic. The touchscreen and the joystick are both very useful ways of telling the camera where you want it to focus. But the feature that we really were excited about is the new tracking interface. Now, older Fujis have tracking autofocus, but it'd be a zone with all the little boxes following everything. Now you get a much more contemporary single box, put it on something, and it should follow it. Now, the tracking interface is by far much nicer than any other Fuji camera. I'm using tracking AF pretty much all day today. It's fantastic for still life where I just say, that's what I want in focus, lock the box on it, recompose and shoot. Works brilliantly. When we do continuous shooting, continuous tracking of fast objects, we did a test here just straight on, Jordan's kid on a bike, and the hit rate is decent, but there are a few missed frames where it's just a little bit off. And that's not to say that that's bad performance, but you gotta remember, the X-T4 is going up against some serious contemporary cameras. Cameras like the Canon EOS M6 Mark II, we actually found that tracking to be a little bit more effective. And of course, any of the high-end Sonys with their real-time autofocus tracking also would do a brilliant job here. Now, there might be some situations randomly where, yeah, you're focusing on one color and it just jumps to another similar color. That'll be annoying. Where I could really see it being an issue is things like sports teams where everybody is wearing similar colors and you might not get that tracking to go where you need it to go. Overall, though, I do say that the X-T4 autofocus is very high-end, okay, and very usable, and you might not even want to use tracking all the time. But overall, I don't think it's the best in class. We interrupt this video to bring you Turk Diggler, the famous Calgary turkey on the loose. Seriously, you can look it up, it's nuts. One of the main features on this camera that's a big upgrade, just in general, is the whole stability of the platform. And it starts with the shutter. First off, probably one of the nicest shutters I've ever used. Super silent, stable, you don't really feel it. The body overall has got a perfect weight for hand holding it, and really can shoot 15 frames per second now mechanical. That's another big upgrade, just as a side point. But really, the IBIS is another huge part of this whole package. Now, the IBIS in the system is actually smaller and lighter than what you'd find on the XH, but it promises to be more stable. And we really wanted to test this with a full version camera. Well, we tried it with a 90mm lens, which is giving me basically 135mm full frame equivalent. I was able to get down to, I would say, quarter, fifth of a second, and still get a very usable result. That puts it up there with a lot of the high-end systems that we're finding with the Micro Four Thirds cameras like Panasonic and Olympus. So as an APS-C camera, this is going to outdo the Sony a6600, which also has IBIS. And the other competition like the Canon EOS M6 Mark II doesn't even have an IBIS system to compete with. Yeah, this is for the people telling me I got to keep both eyes open every time I shoot, or else I'm not doing it right. It feels natural. As usual with high-end Fuji X-T cameras, we've got the 26 megapixel APS-C sensor in here. I know we always extol the virtues of this sensor. Its fast scan rate is great for video and for fast action electronic shutter use. But really, I guess the only observation I really want to make is, why isn't anybody else using this sensor in their cameras? it is still the best APS-C sensor we've come across. All right, so we've had a good time getting some tests downtown here in Calgary, but you know, this is a pretty serious camera. We want to give it a bit more time. We hear that the mountain parks are open, so we're going to head out there. We're going to look at some other stuff, especially video. Let's head there now. I can't say it enough, man. I love fully articulating screens. It's so much nicer to have than the other Fuji system, and I just don't know why people don't like it. I don't get it.
Jordan here to talk about the video features on the Fuji X-T4, and I was a huge fan of the X-T3 before this. That camera gave my favorite image you could get out of an APS-C camera without having to go to a dedicated high-end video camera. And the X-T4 really rectifies most of the real issues I had with that. For starters, getting the bigger battery makes a huge difference. You can get through most shooting days with a single battery. I find I get about 2 hours of run time, give or take, on it. Now for me, the biggest upgrade is finally getting an IBIS system in a camera with this excellent sensor. And it does make a big difference, especially if you're shooting locked off. There's actually a boost mode where it really does look like a tripod unless you're shooting very long focal lengths. Where it can have some issues is if you're planning to do deliberate camera moves like a pan or a tilt, or you're walking with someone, you'll find it can sometimes hesitate, make the movement a little bit jerky. It's certainly not as fluid as what we're seeing off the Panasonic cameras. The good news is a lot of this could probably be fixed in firmware, and Fuji's generally quite good for that. Now I know a lot of photographers are cursing the sky over the decision to add a fully articulating screen, but as a video shooter, I love that they've included this, and they've also revised the interface. So first of all, you've got a dedicated stills and video switch, which I love. Maintains all your settings separately, so you don't have to go back and worry about flipping between log and standard picture profiles. But also, they've got a new interface where you can use dials and the joystick to set your video settings, as well as the touch screen that's on that fully articulating screen. It's one of my favorite video interfaces out there right now, and it's a huge improvement over what we had before. The other feature I was thrilled to see is that this camera can record 240 frames per second. Now it captures it at a 1080 signal, but the image quality is noticeably worse than what you're seeing at 120p and below. But it's great to just have the option of that. You may run into some aliasing, things like that. Another major feature is now we have log assist. I've gotten quite used to working with Fuji's F-Log. It's a very nice log profile, and on wide dynamic range scenes like this, we really do need it, but it's nice to be able to look at a nice 709 preview while you're shooting instead of a washed out gray image. The real problem with the X-T4 is you can see a few places where it's very obvious they might be bringing out a flagship video camera. The X-T3 had a headphone jack, the X-T4 does not, although it is kind of nice that you can use the USB jack and they include the adapter in the box. It's still not ideal, and we've been using the battery grip to make up for that, but that's a fairly expensive accessory just to get a little headphone jack in it. I'm kind of torn with this camera because if you're a photographer who shoots video quite often, the X-T4 is one of the best bodies out there, and I would say definitely the best APS-C camera on the market. But if you're a dedicated video shooter and you're really looking at the X-T4, I do think it might be worthwhile to hold on for a little bit, because I can really see how they could make an X-H2 that has a headphone jack, has some assist tools, maybe something like an XLR adapter. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but I do think that camera's on the horizon.
So is the X-T4 just a minor upgrade to the X-T3? It's tough for us to look at it that way, because here's the thing. When we played with the X-T3, we loved so much about that camera, but we had some issues. For example, the lack of a flip screen. What I really don't love though on this camera is the back LCD. I mean, it's sharp, it's clear, it works well, but it's basically the same articulation system as the Fuji X-T2 fixed. The lack of battery life, it wasn't very good. We're using the NPW126S. It's not the worst battery out there, but it's not the best. They fixed it. The autofocus, it was good, but it could use some improvements. So you might not find it's always the most reliable in a really intense situation. They've improved it. You know, things like IBIS not being present in the X-T3, only in the XH1.
We don't have the inbuilt image stabilization from the XH1.
They fixed it. So really for us to say the X-T4 is not a worthwhile upgrade, I think it's actually fantastic. They took what we thought was one of the best APS-C cameras on the market, and they've just fixed a lot of the issues that camera had remaining. And so really, honestly, this is one of the nicest APS-C cameras on the market. If it actually had the same autofocus capabilities as, you know, the Canon dual pixel AF or the Sony real-time tracking, it would be the undisputed king of APS-C cameras. Regardless, this is a fantastic piece of kit. Now, of course, the X-T4 is going to be a bit pricier in the Fujifilm's overall lineup, and the X-T3 could be very good value. If you don't need the IBIS, if you don't like the fully articulating screen, well, then the X-T3 I think is going to still represent fantastic value, and by all means, don't feel like you have to upgrade here, especially if they move over the tracking focus interface from the X-T4 to the X-T3 with firmware. That would be really, really awesome. If they don't do the bleach bypass Eterna, we'll live. But you know, otherwise, I do think the X-T4 is a worthwhile camera to look at and not just a paltry upgrade. I hope you guys agree. Leave your comments below. Let us know what you think. Please check out our Instagram and our Twitter feeds as well. Subscribe to the channel. We've got so many more videos coming out for you, and we'd love to make sure that you get notified and don't miss those. Thanks so much for joining us. Check out DPReview.com. There'll be sample galleries for you to look at.